Hi, welcome to the Badass Breastfeeding Podcast. This is Dianne, your lactation consultant.
And I'm Abby, the badass breastfeeder. And today's episode is brought to you by Original Sprout. Original Sprout is carries safe, effective pediatrician tested shampoos, conditioners, styling, and body care products. And today's episode is also brought to you by Mother Figure. Mother Figure is a maternal wellness company that makes it easier for moms and moms-to-be to get support. We will hear more from our sponsors later. But you can head to badassbreastfeedingpodcast.com if you need anything and check out our sponsor page because our sponsors make this podcast possible. And if you can give them any of your business, that would be awesome. We have a whole page of the sponsors on badassbreastfeedingpodcast.com. While you're there, you can scroll down and enter your email address and we will send episodes straight to your inbox every week. And now Dianne has our review of the week.
And it comes from iTunes. So thank you so much for putting this on iTunes. And this, she didn't put her real name on here because if it is her real name, she's got lots of consonants in her name with a lot of Z's. So I'm assuming it's not her real name. So she says that we're lifesavers. It says, ladies, this podcast has taught me so much. Currently 25 weeks pregnant with baby number 2, and my first is only 10 months old. Good luck. Oh my God. I give you so much credit for that. I only breastfed my first for 2 months, despite seeing an IBCLC, even though the plan was to breastfeed much longer. Now I realize what it came down to was an extreme lack of education on my part. He was tongue-tied, diagnosed by multiple lactation consultants, and it was extremely painful for me. Thanks to listening to 100 plus episodes of this podcast, I feel so confident going into the second birth, and I know so much more than last time. I have a plan in place for the possibility of a tongue tie again, possibly including a consultation with Dianne. Woo, woo. I feel guilty about cutting my first baby short of all these benefits, but I am determined to be successful this time and even offer breast milk to my first if possible. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I listen to you guys every single day and the education is invaluable. So first of all, congratulations on having another baby within a year of having your first baby, because that is superstar stuff, I tell you. But I also don't want you or anyone out there to feel like guilty because you shortchanged your first baby, because you did not. I mean, I can't tell you how to feel, obviously, but when we know more, we just know more, right? And we just don't worry about what happened in the past. We just got to move forward from that. And now you know, and now you have your things set up for you and you're like, got your ducks in a row. And that's really what matters kind of going forward. So
I mean, who doesn't have regrets?
Oh my gosh, we all have them.
We all have it. Like,
we all have them. Yeah.
So, it's impossible. If you don't have regrets parenting, then you were not awake. You just parented asleep.
I heard somebody say this week, if you don't care, like because it upsets you or because you're, thinking about it or whatever, shows that you really care about your parenting. And, I think that's valid.
That's true.
Yeah. If you were just like, whatever, yeah. But, I mean, you went to the trouble to find your education this time. And I think that that's amazing. So congratulations. Good luck on baby number 2. Let us know how that goes. And thank you for putting that on iTunes for us. That helps the podcast a lot. If you want to give us a review on iTunes, that's awesome. We would love it. But you can also send us an email at, what's our email? badassbreastfeedingpodcast@gmail.com. I had a whole brain fart for a second there. And we get those too, and we love them. So absolutely. Send us all your stuff. And we did get a couple of emails about relationships. So thank you so much for that. And continue that coming in. If you have a little story about relationships that you want to send us, we would love to hear it. So, and today we're going to talk about the pandemic.
Yeah, we know you're sick of talking about it. As sick of talking about it as Will Smith and Chris Rock.
Oh my God. I can't even with that. They're just getting our, just a little something to have our distraction.
Right. Yeah, I know. I'd rather think about that than a pandemic. But
I know.
The pandemic's getting old. We're into our 3rd year now. And
so old. It's not even, yeah. So old.
It's old school news. But the effects, I think that when you are in your house and you're thinking about your own family and how things have changed, it is, especially because it's, so recent, we're in it right now. It's hard to think about and to realize maybe that the larger picture effects, the big picture, the effects on, just kind of more broadly, like birth and parenting and breastfeeding and all of those things. And so that's pretty much like what we're talking about.
And I mean, we see it. I'm seeing it more and more every day, probably because we're into the third year that things are really starting to show up now. But in all aspects, like not even just like with babies, but with babies, I see it in a way. In parenting with super little babies, I see it obviously with, the isolation and things like that we're going to talk about. But like when I do my support group online, it's still on Zoom, and I have a lot of the same parents that come on every week. And those babies are like 2 years old now, because we started, at the beginning of the pandemic, and they're all about knowing how to Zoom.
Yeah.
Because that's all they do.
Yeah.
So now I've got these little like one of them's like, is that Dianne on there? She's like 2.5, like with her little voice, and she's like, is that Dianne? Where's your doggy? Like it's just because this is all they know. Like they don't know anything else. This is how they visit their parents or their grandparents. This is how they see friends. This is how they interact with other kids.
Well, even Exley, he's going to be 8 in a couple of months. And when the pandemic started, he was 5.
Wow.
So he doesn't
think of, yeah.
I know he doesn't have a whole lot of memory pre-pandemic. This will be his first memories.
Yeah.
Even though he was alive for 5 years. And of course he didn't go through kind of what, what he didn't have the baby experience in the pandemic, which would have, had, a lot of effects on him too. But this is what he'll remember.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it's really, I see it in older kids as well. Like I see it with my kids, and sometimes in how they struggle with just even interacting with other human beings, because interaction has been so limited. And now as older teenagers, it's like nobody knows how to interact with each other. I see it like when
teenagers don't know how to act anyway.
They don't know how to act. I see it with, like I was talking about this yesterday when I was at work at the pediatrician's office. We have a psychologist that's there, and we were talking about just how much of a strain this has been on teenagers, really, because of mental health.
And that's such a social time, right?
Yeah.
This is really where adolescence is really where you're kind of like separating a bit from your family, and you're going out and creating your own relationships. And there was all those opportunities were very limited.
And it's really, there's a lot, I think in every stage, really. Like, I see it with my older teens. You see it with your mid-age kids. We see it with the babies. Like somehow it's affected everybody in every stage.
It has. Yeah. And you think about so people first were, you had to stay home from work. A lot of people lost their jobs, financial hardships. Family relationships were strained because now we're all together all the time. Maybe there were abusive situations that are now, domestic violence is up. You have
alcoholism, drug use. Alcoholism is, I think, a big one.
Yes, all of that is up. People's stress, coping mechanisms are up, and then you have kids who aren't going to school. For a lot of kids, that was an escape from maybe an abusive situation. It was a food source for many. I was
going to say that, food source for a lot of people.
Yeah, and then you have, kids that you're not. They're just at home and they're not socializing. Kids are not around other kids in other childcare settings or school or extended families. I mean, and you think about just the ripple effect, how it just kind of rippled through every single aspect of your life. And people weren't getting medical appointments. People that were, birthing, we had to, because you have with parents to focus kind of on parents of young babies, which is, I think, our listeners. There were the people that were pregnant already when the pandemic happened. And then they were faced with, they didn't have a choice. You know, they were like, okay, well, I have to give birth in this pandemic. And it was so early, and they were separating moms, and they're separating babies, not letting partners in,
not
letting
knowing,
doulas, not knowing, nobody knew. And, you know, what a scary time. And then you have the people who have, despite a pandemic, are just choosing to grow their families, which to me is always makes me laugh in a way that, like, the human drive to reproduce is so strong because we're just like, okay, well, yeah, I know there's a pandemic. So, but yeah, it's time to have a baby, which is just, you know, I mean, it's just what we do.
Yeah.
I mean, we've always done, you know, and you look out through, this isn't our first pandemic. I mean, it's our first pandemic, ours that are sitting here listening and talking, but it's not humans' first pandemic.
Right.
It's not humans' first, you know, tragedy. We've gone through, you know, wars and famines, and people have just had babies. People just continue to have babies. All animals do this. It's just like we're wired to just keep going. And it's just funny. It's so funny to just look at, you know, in your conscious mind, look at your animal side and just go, ha ha ha, God, you're an idiot.
But it's true. It is true. And like one of the things I remember thinking, like when I was seeing people having babies, and it was if they were already pregnant and the pandemic hit, like there's nothing you can do, right? Like there's obviously, but it was really a couple of things that really kind of stood out to me on the negative and the positive side was that now all of these, you know, people that are going through pregnancy, they're trying to go to appointments, but now they can't have a support person with them anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And that was very scary to a lot of people, you know, and now their partner, who that was how they're involved, right? Now you have partners who are trying to be part of the pregnancy and trying to bond with this baby, which is super hard to do when the baby is in somebody else. But that's their way. They want to hear the heartbeat at the appointment. They can go to the ultrasounds. Like that's the way that they stay involved. And now that was cut off from them. And that was really scary and sad. And a lot of pregnant people were just like, what, you know, I have to go to these appointments alone. I don't like that. You know, I don't have a support person. So that was really hard for them.
I know what I heard most from people was like the fear of, because there was this totally not scientifically backed at all policy that the hospitals were separating the babies if the parent had been, you know, tested positive for COVID or exposed to COVID or suspected whatever. They're just taking the babies and putting them in a different room, which was like traumatizing to even think about.
Yeah,
for people. And I don't think that's happening now, is it? I don't think
so. I don't think so.
Then again, we're trying to talk broadly about thousands and thousands of hospitals in America that already are not on the same page.
Right. And, but then we had like the situation where people were working from home, right? People got sent home to work from home in jobs that would normally not be working from home, but then they figured out how to make it work, which was amazing. And now we had partners who would have never had paternity leave be home for extended periods of time, which was really nice. And that we got a lot of
healthy relationships, then that was nice.
Yes, absolutely. And I think a lot of partners were very grateful for that on both sides. You know, I think a lot of, you know, birthing parents were like, this is great. I get my partner home for a little bit longer than I would have. And a lot of partners were like, I get to have more time home, which is really nice. So that was definitely, you know, kind of a benefit. Still not able to go to appointments, which sucked. I can't tell you how many, even just in the last probably couple of months, I was doing pediatric appointments with one parent in the room and the other on FaceTime sitting in the car in the parking lot. And I was like, come on, you know, like it's the first doctor's appointment, you know, there was one time I had a mom that came in. This was only like maybe 2 months ago, where they would not let the partner in. They were only doing one parent at a time. So the mom came in with the newborn baby, and she had like vacuum extraction delivery, blood loss, like all of this horribly traumatic stuff happened. But because it wasn't a C-section, they only let one parent in.
Oh.
And I was like, can't we go get the partner? She should not be carrying this car seat. Like, come on.
Yeah.
What, come on. What are we doing here? And they did. They were like, yeah, let's go get and they went and got him and he came in or whatever. But it was like, this is ridiculous. We are like 2.5 years into this pandemic. Everybody, they all had vaccinated, been vaccinated, whatever.
I'm sure everyone was wearing a mask.
Right. Exactly. Everybody's wearing a mask. Nobody's touching each other. Nobody's near each other. Like, let the partner in. Come on. Don't make her carry this car seat by herself. She just went through blood transfusion and traumatic delivery and everything else. Like, she could barely walk anyway because of how much damage was done to her and how much of a significant repair she had to have.
And don't they tell you, don't lift this, don't do that.
Right.
And then here, but you don't have any help. So here you go.
Ridiculous.
Yeah. And
this is what doctors' offices were doing all over the place.
Right. Yeah. Right. Well, and on one hand, we didn't know what was going on. We had no idea what this thing was, and everyone was panicking and trying to,
They're just trying to do the best thing, but was it really?
Yeah.
Was it really the best thing for the new parents? That's what we're talking about today. Like, was it really the best thing for new parents?
Well, right. And that whole thing of the separating the baby thing, my thing was like, we don't know if separating, the baby is helpful, but we do know that separating baby is harmful.
Right.
We do know that, just bottom line, flat out, that that baby needs to be with the parent. That's the safest place for the baby after birth.
Right.
And so we know that. We don't know this other thing, but we were just jumping to it. I mean, we were the only ones doing it. America,
right. The World Health Organization was like, do not separate mothers and babies, please.
Right. We don't have enough information right now to think that that's necessary. And so, but America just does stuff. But I was reading when I was reading around, looking at trying to kind of get a feel of what's out there, what's being said about this. And one thing what was interesting that I hadn't thought about was that labors have just labor in general have gotten longer. And we think about like people, pregnant people in quarantine are less active.
Mm-hmm.
Making it more difficult for like spontaneous labor to happen. It's making labors longer. It's making birth interventions have increased.
Oh.
And stress, stress, of course, has an effect on all of this, which is affecting just labor in general. And, this affects like the way your labor is going to go, and then leads to interventions, which we know has an effect on breastfeeding, which we know has an effect on kind of everything. And, you don't really stop and think something about like the ripple effect of it all. No. And there's nothing, we're not saying, we're not, there's nothing we could do about it. It just is acknowledging, looking into it a little bit deeper than what we do in our everyday lives, really.
Yeah. So let's do our sponsors, and then we're going to talk about how this impacted a lot of lactation stuff, breastfeeding and all that. So
we'll be right back. Today's episode is brought to you by Mother Figure. Mother Figure is a maternal wellness company that makes it easier for moms and moms-to-be to get support. Mother Figure offers a directory that connects families with lactation consultants, doulas, pelvic floor physical therapists, and more nationwide. A magazine that spotlights real mom stories and a need-to-know info from experts. And maternity clothing that's beautiful, functional, and machine washable. Mother Figure's multitasking maternity bra is a hands-free pumping, nursing, and everyday bra that's been featured on Romper, Parents, Scary Mommy, and more. It's Ucotex certified and has been called one of the best nursing and pumping combo bras on the market. You can check it out at shop.motherfigure.com and use code BADASS for 25% off your purchase. If you did use the code before, we were advertising it as 15% off, but it's actually 25% off. So hopefully you were pleasantly surprised by that. And if you haven't used it, use it. Shop.motherfigure.com. BADASS is the code that you can use at checkout, and that will get you 25% off your purchase. Today's episode is also brought to you by Original Sprout. Original Sprout carries safe, effective, and pediatrician-tested shampoos, conditioners, styling, and body care products produced and packaged in California, USA. Are you sporting a hairstyle that needs extra support? The classic hair gel is made with apple and apricot extract while hydrating hair with cucumber, securing even the most elaborate hairstyles. I use it to tame my frizz and flyaways. And the classic styling balm is made with shea and cocoa butter that provides a long-lasting hold and ideal for styling curls. All of Original Sprouts products are paraben and phthalate-free, vegan, and cruelty-free. Their proprietary formulas contain nourishing extracts from fruits, vegetables, and flowers that the whole family can enjoy. Made for babies, perfect for grown-ups too. Check out the entire line at originalsprout.com and use code BADASS for 25% off your purchase. That's originalsprout.com and use code BADASS for 25% off your purchase. And our promo codes and our sponsor information can be found in our show notes under this episode at badassbreastfeedingpodcast.com. Our show notes will also include further information about things we talk about in this episode. And at badassbreastfeedingpodcast.com, you will also find our breastfeeding resources, all of our other episodes, and information about scheduling your very own one-on-one online lactation consultation with Dianne.
Yeah. So,
okay, pandemic.
So one of the things that came up, at least here, I don't know if it's, what it was like everywhere else, but I feel like lactation consultants were like one of the first to go.
Yeah.
So,
well, they're,
like,
yeah.
Like in the hospital,
always the first to go.
Right. Yeah. They're like, we don't need you. But like in the hospital setting, they were taking out as many, they were having limited staff, obviously, like it was limited. And you weren't staying in the hospital very long at all. Like where it used to be 2 days, which isn't a lot, went to like 24 hours. And that's really not a lot of time to get the help you need if you need more extra help. Mm-hmm. But the other thing was I know like in the hospitals here, the lactation consultants were maybe moved to, if they were RNs, were moved to the floor to help work, or they were, moved to different parts of the hospital to help work, or they were just furloughed. And been like, okay, you're extra staff that we don't need here. And we're trying to limit the amount of staff that's here to limit transmission. So you got to go. That I know that was happening like in the pediatric offices and things like that. They were just like, okay, if you're needed, we'll have you come in. But if not, we're not going to have you just be here just in case. So the support systems were really limited for lactation. And I'm sure with everything else, but this is a breastfeeding podcast. So that's what we're talking about.
Right. Yeah.
But then you can't whereas home visits, then that stopped, obviously. So where people used to come to we used to be able to go to people's homes and help with babies right away. And, when parents came home from the hospital and if they needed extra support with breastfeeding, that stopped, obviously. So really getting help was very, very limited, at least hands-on help. We're able to do a lot of video stuff and people are like, how can you do, which I still do tons of videos. And I think that has really been helpful. But if somebody wanted, somebody really just at their home, that was a really hard thing because you couldn't do that anymore.
But it didn't stop was the formula-free samples.
Oh, because that could get delivered right to your house.
Right.
Come on.
And so what an opportunity. Mm-hmm. To, advertise our product and kind of offer this. And it's not working out for you. Well, don't worry. And we know how important, breastfeeding is, in any kind of disaster situation. And this is what this is. A pandemic is a natural disaster. Mm-hmm. And breastfeeding is something that is, first of all, protecting, babies from the virus, from serious illness. And, we've seen with this recent, that we had the formula recall. But even before the formula recall, there was formula shortages because the, supply chain is breaking down and people couldn't get formula. Yeah. And so we're seeing, the effects of, when you're not breastfeeding or when you're reliant on formula, how that plays out in a natural disaster.
I did a prenatal this week with somebody who this is her third baby and her first two babies she was not successful with breastfeeding, a lot of lack of support and things like that. But she was like, okay, now I'm having my third, and formula is not as easy to find. And when you do find it, it's expensive. And there, it's just, we don't know. There's been recalls. Like, that's scary.
And can I just say for 1 second how fucking disgusting it is to jack up the prices of formula?
I know.
This is capitalism here.
Yeah.
This is capitalism at work. Capitalism at its finest is that we're in, supply is short. The stuff that we need. And this was happening at the beginning of the pandemic too, with things like vitamins and toilet paper and hand sanitizer.
Yeah.
What?
And bread. Everything.
Yeah, right. Everything was in shortage. So companies were just jacking up the price. What the hell, man? If that doesn't tell you everything that you need to know. I mean, and then the babies are like reliant on this formula and they can't find it. And then they jack up the prices of what this baby needs to survive. Give me a break.
I know. It's awful. But if that's going to help somebody to make a decision about breastfeeding, then fantastic. That is... Well, then that's a very valid reason to want to try to breastfeed. That's a very valid reason.
People were trying to relactate and things like this, trying to get donor milk because they couldn't feed their babies. And they couldn't. It's happening right now. This is right. We're in this formula shortage right now. And the recall.
Real things.
And then this goes to show that we need more breastfeeding support right now, how that would be helpful. But of course, that's not happening.
And that was limited.
That's not the answer that anyone has, duh.
Right. It's just, and it's limited. So it's very, very difficult, to say the least. And even little things that we would do to help, if you're really struggling with breastfeeding, depending on the situation, sometimes we do recommend other resources, chiropractic and feeding therapy and, tongue tie release and things like that we need sometimes to make breastfeeding successful. And all of that stuff was off the table too. So it really made it hard to be successful. And then at the same time, you're trying to recover from having a baby. You don't have any help because you're isolated. You don't have people coming in to help you that normally would come in to help you. It's just, there's so much you're up against when it's just unbelievable.
Yeah. And it's interesting because I was talking to a neighbor of mine. I've had 2 neighbors who have had babies in the past year or so. And one of the neighbors I was talking to, she had her baby real closer to, I think she was one of the ones who was pregnant before it happened. And so I was asking her, what was it like? Da, da, da. And she was like, it was my first baby, so I don't really know the difference. Mm-hmm. And that's really interesting. It's true. If you're having your first child, you don't know what's different. You're not like, oh, this is different in the hospital now. That's different. That's different. Because you've never been there.
Right.
This is normal to you. And, we always talk about parenting and being a new parent and all of this stuff as being so isolating. And people going through this now being even more isolated than ever before. And so this is, in some ways, some people's normal.
Mm-hmm. True. That's very true. We know, and we've talked about a lot on different episodes about how isolating being a new parent is anyway. And then we are in a situation like a pandemic where interaction with other people is not even an option. And it really caused, I think, a lot of postpartum issues, a lot of mental health problems. And even if you weren't having a baby in a pandemic, I think there was a lot of mental health stuff happening. I know, me personally, I remember even just the other day, I was texting with my sister about something, and I'm like, I really feel like I looked completely different before the pandemic. I feel like I was aged over the last 2 years.
Oh yeah, it's when you see a before and after of the president, before their presidency and then after the presidency, they've all aged 20 years.
I know, that's how I feel. And my sister's like, "You're fine," and I'm like, I really feel like I looked way different pre-pandemic. I just feel like I'm just
long
aged.
enough to age.
I know, but I feel like it's just really there was just something about every day was Groundhog Day. Like every day you wake up, you're in the same thing. You're not like, oh, tomorrow I'm going to, I'm going to go for an outing. Like, I'm so glad to finally see parents who are like, tomorrow we're going to go out and maybe go to Target, like now they can do stuff like that just to get out of the house. Yeah. Nobody was doing that. And you couldn't do that. And it was just like, oh my gosh, we're all just stuck inside with each other. What do we do? And that wasn't good for mental health for people that needed to be, especially if you're like an extrovert anyway. And you're like, oh my gosh, I need to, be play groups and, do things with my others. I mean, I had a couple of moms in my group where like the first one was born pre-pandemic and now they had we're having their second during the pandemic. So their first one was only like, 1 or 2 years old. And she's like, we've never been to the library. We've never been, anywhere together. Yeah, like we've never done anything. Like my kid is, and I've had a lot of parents say that, like my kid is 2. We've never gone anywhere. And it's like, wow. Oh my God. Like that really puts into perspective what a long 2 years that must have been.
Right. Right.
And then we worry about how is this impacting their development?
Right. Right. And this is something that we see, or it's possible that we would see some delays in this area.
Mm-hmm.
And that must be so panic inducing for parents to see a baby that's not meeting their developmental milestones. However, talk to your doctor about it, because it is possible that it is just a symptom of, of living in quarantine.
Mm-hmm.
It's possible that this is it, and kids will catch up, and everybody's in the same boat. That's why I can't stand listening to people say like, "Oh, the kids are missing school; they're so behind." Behind who? Like literally behind who?
Right.
Like everybody is going through the exact same thing.
Right. I mean, and I think as parents, we blame ourselves, right? This is not our fault, but we're like, oh my gosh, my kid is not where quote unquote they should be. Have I not done enough with them? Have I not done enough to encourage growth and development? Have I not done enough to? No, this is not our fault. This is not our fault.
Yeah, it's not our fault that we're home, we're stuck at home or, not doing our normal lives. It's also not our fault that we're like laying in the fetal position on the floor.
Right.
You're making these, especially early on, it felt like you were making these life or death decisions every day,
Mm-hmm.
like, okay, is this safe to do? Is this not safe? I don't know. And, it's like, that's not a normal state of mind to be in.
Right.
Every single day, all the time.
No, it's like you're always in fight or flight. That is not healthy.
Exactly.
That is not healthy to always be in a fight or flight mode.
Yeah. And I think that we should talk about, since we're talking about the pandemic, I know that there's still a lot of questions around what, can I breastfeed? What do I do if I get COVID? Can I get the vaccine? And all these things.
Mm-hmm.
Even though there's more information out there, there's still people kind of wondering. There's still people that are like, what do I do? What do I really do? And you please do continue to breastfeed when you get COVID.
Yes, please
That
do.
That is the best thing you can do.
Just like any other illness.
Yes.
Any other illness, because I know sometimes people are still unsure. I always still get messages. I have the stomach bug. Can I still breastfeed? Yes, absolutely. If you feel up to it, I'm not going to say, oh my gosh, you have to breastfeed. Because personally, if I'm sick, I don't want anybody near me. Right. I don't want anybody touching me. I don't want any, so if you're kind of one of those people who are like, I just don't even want the baby on me. I just feel, that's okay. Give them milk from the freezer. If you can pump, that's great. That's fine.
You're going to need to pump because you don't want to get, mastitis.
You're definitely going to need to pump, but do what you can do if you are sick.
Yeah.
But it is not harmful for you to breastfeed your baby when you are sick. It is actually beneficial.
Yes, it's a great idea because they have found COVID antibodies in breast milk.
Yes.
So those are being passed to the baby. The same thing with the vaccine. The antibodies are being passed to the baby.
Absolutely. And I have families that are like, I'm going to keep breastfeeding, like they're toddlers. I just want to get through one more winter of COVID to give my baby these antibodies
Right.
because it is very powerful. They are finding it in the milk. They're finding that it's passing to the babies. If you were vaccinated during breastfeeding, which you can be, that is going to the babies as well. Like it is so beneficial for your baby to get these antibodies, just like we encourage that. Just that is one of the biggest reasons why people choose to breastfeed is so that babies can get antibodies. That doesn't change because this is a new disease.
Right.
This is the same thing. Yeah. It's the same thing. So your baby is getting a lot of benefit from it as well. Don't worry about that whole where we were talking about, oh yeah, they're separating babies in the beginning. They had no idea what they were doing. They had no idea what they were doing. And it was not the correct thing. We know that.
Yeah, we know that now.
And then they'll say oh, breastfeed the baby and then go put them in another room. No, that's ridiculous. I know. It's just, it is so ridiculous. There is stuff happening that I just could not even understand. People would tell me that they'd be like, yeah, I tested positive. Cause we know, right, that people test positive and then they might be living with somebody who never tests positive. We know that happens. It's just random or whatever.
Yeah.
So now you have people oh, I tested positive, but my partner didn't. And they said, so I couldn't go to a doctor's appointment, but my partner could because he didn't. But you're all living in the same house. You're all exposed.
Yeah.
What is, and then I got to put the baby down and I can't be with the baby. I can only breastfeed them with a mask on and, gloves or whatever. And then I've got to hand the baby off to somebody else. You're all exposed. You're all in the same house. So that didn't ever make any sense to me. You can breastfeed your baby. You can hold your baby. You can do skin to skin with your baby. It's okay. It is totally okay.
Yeah. These are the things that protect babies.
Yes.
Not Absolutely. Putting them in a room by themselves and separating them.
No, that is not okay.
And, I think about if I tested positive for COVID, I don't know. I might open a window, try to make it ventilate a little.
Yeah.
Maybe I would try to, stay in another room or put a mask on or something. My kids are older, though, so it's totally different. If I had a baby, though, if my kids were older and I had a baby, I would take the baby into the other room.
Yeah, isolate just doing I'd
be I'll just not isolate, I'll come out sometimes, but maybe I would try to spend most of my time in another room just to minimize, because you can't remove the risk, right?
Right.
And I'm not going to lock myself in a room and never see my children. I think that some of the things, I do realize that would remove risk, by separating and quarantining in a room, shut the door, we'll open the door in 2 weeks.
Yeah.
But I can't do that. No. I have 2 kids that I need to see, and they're old enough where I could be okay, I'm going to just be in here, I'll spend my relaxing time in here, or I'll nurse the baby in here just to spend a little bit more time away to minimize risk. But I don't, it's not practical, because we have a lot of this information that comes out of things that you can do to minimize risk. And then some of it is just not practical as a parent.
Right.
And that's where you have to, I think, take the situation into your own hands.
Mm-hmm.
And you have to do what you can do. Do what you can do. And then also realize that you're a parent and that your rules are different for you. They just are.
You have to do the best you can with what you have to work with.
Right.
Really. It just, and then you had, in the beginning there with essential workers, you have all these people that are quarantined at home, and then you have essential workers. And it's were they supposed to stay away from their families?
Well, yeah, right.
They weren't doing that. You can't do that. That's not realistic. And you hear these stories about, oh, my husband's staying in another, in our camper in the front yard. Well, right. I remember reading that somewhere. I don't know if it was a Facebook post or something. And it's oh my gosh, this is how scared we were.
Well, yeah, but also think about how middle class of recommendation these are. People don't have work from home. What? People that work in factories can't work from home.
Right.
People need to go to work to make money. Otherwise they'll be on the street, because the government doesn't help anybody here. Other countries are paying people to stay home. Here it was go to work. Oh, stay home.
Right.
And people that have office jobs and stuff like that, my husband could work from home, but that's not what everybody has.
No,
they don't have that opportunity. And it's so, I don't know. We're always making these recommendations based on the lifestyle and the resources of a few.
Yeah.
Not the majority, really.
I was reading something, and it was actually a really good article, but then I kind of felt like it was very almost like middle class-ish, because, and it was great because it was written by somebody who had a set of twins during a pandemic, but then also had 2 other younger kids. And she was talking about like things that you could do to kind of help and, giving suggestions, and it was really good. But then she was like, my husband's sister was vaccinated, so she was able to fly in and help us. It's like, that is not something that's possible for the majority of people.
Just fly them in.
Right. And then our parents, parents had flown in to help, and they brought us and bought us a new freezer and stocked it up with food. It's like, that's not something everybody can do.
That the majority of Americans cannot afford a plane ticket.
Or a new freezer to stock up with food from Costco.
Right. Or the space.
Or the space. Exactly.
Like, this is what I get into with the whole, like, oh, baby should be sleeping in a separate room and blah, blah, blah. Like, what? This is not how most people live. Most people do not live to have a separate room for each member of the family. Yeah. Give me a break.
And it was, that was part of her thing too. She's like, oh, we had bought a new car and then we found out we were having twins. So now we had to get a different car. It's like, that's not realistic for other people, for a lot of people, and then she was like, and, luckily my husband works for, I think she's in Wells Fargo. So he was able to get 16 weeks of paternity leave. And it's like, this is an article that was written for like, I don't even know, not the majority of people.
Right.
Because that is not the norm. It is not. And especially and when we were going through, and I didn't have a baby, but, me and my kids were isolated, obviously. I was sent home from working and doing whatever I could do from home, which wasn't a lot. Phone calls really was, about the most I could do. Home with my kids who are trying to do school online. And my husband's an essential worker, so he was gone and coming home in and out. And it was really before we knew a lot of stuff. And I was like, so what if you bring it? We're here doing nothing. We're completely isolated. And what if we get sick because of you? That's
the situation that the majority of Americans were in.
Exactly. And if I had a newborn, I don't know, I might have had to send him away. Like, I would have been that paranoid because I was anyway.
Well, exactly. In the beginning. Yeah, totally. I would have been. But then again, I have this situation, you have this situation probably too, is where there's like, we have a basement and there's a room down here that has a bathroom in it. I'd be like, you're just going to be down there.
Yeah.
We'll hang out with you we'll be at the top of the stairs. You can be at the bottom of the stairs.
Well, there was one.
People can't do this.
I know most people can't do that. We had one point. So my father-in-law passed away right before, right as things were getting shut down. So their house was empty and we were trying to clean it out and stuff like that. I was like, you might just have to stay at your parents' house, which he didn't. He was like, I'm not doing that. Like, what, for the next year? That's crazy. Right. And I'm like, all right, whatever. I didn't know what to do, but there was a lot of time. And I think a lot of it was my own frustration that I was stuck at home. I was stuck at home. I couldn't go anywhere. I couldn't do anything but order sweatpants online because that was basically my whole thing.
I swear to God, leggings and sweatpants. That market must have boomed so much over the pandemic.
Right. And, just trying to support my kids through it because they were frustrated with everything. And it's like, I can't imagine if I'd had a newborn or if I was, I don't know. It was such a difficult time for everybody, and everybody had their own issue with it, and everybody's issue was different. And it just it was so hard. And now we're trying to come out of it. And it's like, so what is life like now? It's just people with newborns and babies are almost afraid still to do anything.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because this is all they've known for 2 years.
Right. Right. Yeah. You became a parent in a pandemic. Hi, name of the episode.
Yeah.
And that shaped your whole entire transition to parenthood.
Right.
The pandemic did.
Yeah.
And even maybe, daily, you didn't think about it like that, especially entering the 3rd year. Maybe it's not at the forefront of everyone's mind. But it really did. And you don't know. You don't know, what it was like to become a parent, right before that. It's like, like how 9/11, changed so much about how we fly, the experience of flying on an airplane.
Yeah.
And we think about people that, before that happened, if you weren't old enough to fly before that, you don't know that all the things that you go through now are new.
Mm-hmm. Right. And one of the other things too, and of course you can relate to this because I know you went through it. We got a lot of messages from people who were like, what do I do? Because I have a newborn and I'm nervous about, my newborn getting sick and being exposed, or my baby, or whatever stage your baby was in. But my family doesn't believe in quarantining, and my family doesn't believe in the vaccine, or my family doesn't believe in, being cautious. So I don't want them over. And now they're mad at me. Like, it just, when you're on opposite sides, and I know you kind of went through that too.
Totally.
So it's like, and my kids were older, so it's like, and I wasn't seeing anybody anyway, but my family, my dad was gone, but my mom was, was good about it. And she was very much, kind of isolated or whatever. And my sister's the same. And we just all kind of kept in touch and respected each other's wishes or whatever. But there's a lot of families that don't respect each other's wishes.
Totally. And or because this would happen in my family too, they would be like, oh no, we're being cautious. Yeah. And then you ask them questions and like you realize that people's definition of caution varies greatly.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, no, and you're like, wait, but didn't you, you said you're being cautious, but then you just said that you went to like a party with like 200 people at the club. And it's Wisconsin. No one's wearing masks. Like, what, I'm like, whoa, okay. So what is it that you're not doing exactly? What is it that you, like, what are the sacrifices you've made exactly? Because I'm not clear.
Yeah. And I know one of my families, it was very clear to their in-laws, to all parents on both sides. It wasn't just like one side. It was clear to everybody. We're all vaccinated. I know you guys are too, but obviously our 1-year-old is not. So we're going to ask that you please be cautious. Please wear a mask. This is when things were kind of like loosening up a little bit.
Yeah.
And then she caught her father-in-law, not caught, but like she went to go pick up something at a store and saw her father-in-law walking into a store with no mask. So she was like,
busted.
Exactly. Yep. And she was told her husband, like, you need to handle this kind of thing. And he was like, yeah, and her father-in-law was, yeah, I did. So like, we asked you, please be cautious because, we can't let you see the baby then. If you're not going to be cautious, you can't see the baby. And it's like, right. That's a hard conversation to have with family that's there to help you. Right. It's
a hard conversation to have. It's just like, the boundaries with families. Yeah. We've had episodes about that, where it's so difficult because everybody's so defensive about it.
I know it. So you guys, we don't have a lot of answers here.
We could just keep talking about this all day. It's so interesting. We're living through history.
It really is. And, I hope everybody's feeling, comfortable coming out of it. And I know, of course, people are having their, having babies still, like you said, that does not stop. And we know more now, which is a good thing. We know more. I know a lot of people feel really like their experience having the baby, when the pandemic first started and there was separation and there was isolation and there was, all of that was just, we hear you that was not an ideal situation because it wasn't. It was terrible and you got robbed.
Yeah.
But there's just nothing else to say about that. Like, it just was awful. But it's not how it's supposed to be. But,
no. And I mean, it'll never go back to completely normal because, things have changed.
Right.
And things don't just go back. They evolve. And it will continue to evolve into, a new normal or a new life after the pandemic.
So I will link, I've got, a couple cool things that I can link some articles. I'll link the article about the mom who had people flying in and buying her new freezers and stuff like that. So everybody can read that. Because there was some good, stuff in there, but I was just like, wait a minute. It's craziness. But there's a lot of stuff. There's a lot of baggage attached to this pandemic. That isn't just what people talk about because nobody talks about. I feel like this got lost. nobody's really talking about what's happening with those little babies that were born in the pandemic. So
that's true. Yeah, the little pandemic babies.
But yeah, so if anybody has a story they want to share,
please let us know. Yeah, we would love to hear stories. I mean,
how you got through it, like how you got through it, and maybe you have a trick, maybe you have something that was beneficial to you. There was a lot of, online groups that came out at this time. There was a lot of support online and through social media that happened, which was nice. So if you have anything you want to share, go ahead and send it to us.
Thanks for listening.
Thank you. Bye.